Brussels under attack. At least 34 killed in multiple explosions across the city. There were 2 blasts at Brussels airport in the morning rush hour.
I hear an explosion, big explosion inside the airport.
And she said, no, I'm too scared, I stay. I said, no, we can't stay here because if they come downstairs, we're the only one here, they will kill us.
Another bomb exploded on a busy metro train where shell-shocked passengers fled the wreckage. This image emerges of 3 suspects as so-called Islamic State says it carried out the attacks. I'm live in Brussels tonight with all the very latest on this fast-moving story. And across the UK, security at major transport hubs is stepped up. The Prime Minister defiant.
We need to stand together against these appalling terrorists and make sure they can never win.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin in Brussels.
Good evening from Brussels on a dark day for this city. It is the terrorist atrocity Belgium had feared for months. Tonight, at least 34 people are dead and nearly 200 others are injured. The target was the transport system, the city's airport and metro, right in the middle of the morning rush hour. The so-called Islamic State say they carried out the attacks. Within the last hour, the Belgian prosecutor says 2 bombers died at the airport, while a manhunt has been launched for a third. This is what we know tonight. 14 people were killed in the bombings at the airport. 20 died in an explosion at Maalbeek metro station in the city centre. Brussels went into immediate lockdown with the airport and the city's public transport systems closed. Tonight, our correspondents in the city will have the very latest live. Our first report is from Raghi Omar on how the horror of the Brussels attacks unfolded.
At 8 a.m. Brussels time, there were 2 blasts inside the departure lounge at the city's main international airport. The check-in desks and the passengers queuing at them were the target. At least 1 explosion was a suicide bomb.
Okay, I go.
And there were reports that as survivors fled the first attack, they ran straight into the path of the second. And as it became obvious that the airport was under a sustained terror attack, people fled for their lives. These large explosions turned order into chaos. These scenes are what every traveller fears, and exactly what the terrorists intended.
Yes, I hear an explosion, big explosion inside the airport.
And she said, no, I'm too scared, I stay. I said, no, we can't stay here because if they come downstairs, we're the only one here, they will kill us.
This witness says he heard a gunshot, then a man shouting in Arabic, and afterwards he just heard a big boom. But just as Brussels geared itself to deal with the injured and traumatized at the airport, there was news of another attack across the city. This time in the metro. A bomb in a train carriage exploded between stations, leaving passengers stranded and terrified in the underground darkness. These attacks, coming so soon after a significant terrorist arrest at the weekend, appear coordinated. The Belgian Prime Minister called it a dark day, saying what they all feared could happen had happened. Brussels, by no means the first European city to suffer like this, felt the support of its neighbours. The terrorists have attacked Belgium, but it was Europe that they targeted. Belgium has raised its terrorism alert to its highest level. This city is in virtual lockdown, a major European hub without planes, trains or trams running, brought to a standstill. And as the so-called Islamic State group said it was behind the attacks, Belgian police released a photograph of a group of 3 they think were involved. They believe the two on the left died in the explosion and the third man is still at large. Flags are now flying at half-mast on government buildings, just meters from the scene of the metro attack. And as Brussels counts its dead, 3 days of national mourning have been declared. The hundreds who survived today's atrocity are tonight in shock. But the repercussions of this latest attack on a European capital will be felt far beyond this damaged city.
Well, Mark, this evening, the airport where I'm talking to you from is under a very heavy security compound, and there's quite clearly an eerie emptiness and silence here. There's a few people, survivors, who are staying in hotels not far from where I'm talking to you from. One man told me this evening, as I was leaving to come and talk to you, that he'd seen someone die right in front of them when he was in the airport. And the sense that Brussels now joins a long growing list of European capitals who've been attacked by so-called Islamic State. Paris, Ankara, Istanbul, and now Brussels.
All right, Raggy, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, the bombings show all the hallmarks of being carefully coordinated. The double blast in the main terminal at Zaventem Airport went off just after 8 o'clock this morning local time. The first blast was near the excess baggage desk, the second by a nearby Starbucks cafe. The bomb in the middle carriage of a metro train at Maalbeek Station was around an hour later. Maalbeek Station is close to the main European Union building, just very close to here where I am. Our correspondent Emma Murphy reports now on the devastation of the metro bomb.
After the attack on the airport, the billowing smoke from the metro gave the first indication of the ambush deep below ground. A single blast in a central carriage, taking the deaths into double figures. At least 30 killed, dozens injured, countless other lives decimated by an ideology built on hate. On the pavements, makeshift triage and treatment areas. The stretchers being lined up, a dreadful indication of the life and death struggles beneath. This woman said, "I was very frightened because they said that we had to evacuate the metro and everyone was screaming."
It was pretty devastating. You could clearly see a shockwave destroy the whole front side of the station, even though the explosion occurred somewhere far away, deep inside the station.
For those trapped beneath ground, a long walk along dark tracks was the only means of escape. Each step taking them closer to the station, but without any guarantee of its safety. The passenger who filmed these images described the moment of the explosion.
We felt a small blast of air, and we heard some thudding in the distance. The metro immediately stopped. The lights turned off, the engine turned off, and a message came over the intercom saying that there had been a disturbance on the line.
These scenes are becoming familiar on European streets, but their dreadfulness does not diminish. They are a reminder of our vulnerability and the wish of others to exploit it to destroy.
And Emma is at the station this evening. Emma, clearly an horrific ordeal for those caught up in the attack there.
Absolutely. The station is just a short distance behind the European Commission building behind me. And to see those hearses pulling up to take away the bodies of people who got on a train this morning, a commuter train to go to work, it can hardly be described, the dreadfulness of what has gone on here. And for many commuters, the events of November were so familiar in their minds, the fact that this city was put into lockdown, that the metro was closed, but they had started to feel slightly more safe, that perhaps they were moving away from that situation of terror that gripped them at the end of last year. Today has been an absolute dreadful example that they have not moved away from the threat. The threat still remains, and it remains in this city tonight.
All right, Emma, thank you very much for that. Well, there is no word so far as to whether any Britons were among those who died in the explosions. Downing Street said earlier today that one British person was injured in the attack on Brussels Airport. There are as yet no further details on his condition. Well, this is a city enveloped by grief as well as shock tonight, as you might well imagine. And amidst that grief, the people of Brussels have been paying their tributes to the victims of the bombings. At Bourse Square, people are writing their thoughts in chalk on the pavements. With bravery and dignified compassion, they've turned out on the streets of Brussels to show their feelings for those who were killed and injured. Martin Geisler is there this evening. Martin, what's happening there now?
Well, it's a gathering point, as you say, Mark. A lot of people here this evening. In the middle of the crowd, I've just been told, is the Belgian Prime Minister. He's come to commune with these people. You know, after something awful like this happens to a city, very often one area just emerges as the spontaneous place where people come to commune, to be together, to share their thoughts. In Paris, you'll remember, Mark, it was the Place de la République back in November. Here in Brussels, it seems to be this place, Bourse Square, in front of the old Stock Exchange building. People are lighting candles, they're singing gently behind me, and they are, as you say, writing their thoughts in chalk across the tarmac. The overwhelming sentiment there seems to be defiance, solidarity and defiance. The message coming through from what people are saying on the floor here is these people cannot, they will not win, and we will not let them win. There's one banner pinned up on the railings in front of the Stock Exchange building there. It says "Unis contre la haine," united against hate, and that sums it up pretty well. I lived in the city, Mark, for a couple of years. I know Brussels. I've just driven across town tonight. I've never seen the streets so quiet, but those who are out are coming here. One would imagine they'll come here for the rest of tonight and over the coming days as well to reiterate that sentiment. Brussels has been hurt today, Mark. It's been hurt very badly, but the people here are determined to show the world that it will not be broken.
All right, Martin, thank you. Another night of mourning in another European city. And I'm joined now by Zoya Sheftalovic, who was on her way into work when the explosion at the metro station took place. Thanks very much for joining us. Give us a sense of what you witnessed this morning.
I was on my way into work and I got a text message from a colleague saying that there had been a second set of attacks at the Malbec metro station. Malbec is around about halfway between my house and my office where I was heading into. I was on foot, so I started to run because I knew that this was something that I needed to confirm. When I got close to Malbec, probably around about 30 metres down the road on Rue de la Loire, which is just behind us, there were police sort of stopping people from moving forward on that side of the street, lots of people milling around and filming. I crossed the road to the other side and was able to get closer, and I was right opposite the entrance to the metro station, and it was a terrible sight. There were people lying on the ground, they were covered in white blankets, lots of people crying, some people were covered in blood. It was only I think it was just about 10 minutes after the actual blast happened, so there was still a very pungent smell of a blast having happened in that area, and you could see some smoke still coming out of the station.
All right, and let's be clear, you knew there'd been a bomb at the airport, so you didn't go on the metro, you decided to walk to work, so you must consider yourself very fortunate this evening.
I do. I mean, the station and that train is my normal train and my normal station where I get off to get to work. But as soon as I heard about the Brussels airport blast, I knew that it was not a good idea to take the metro or any public transport, because we've seen with blasts around Europe and also elsewhere that they come in packs, in clusters, and I had no intention of being in a metro where this was likely to happen again.
All right, just finally, give me a sense of what you think this atrocity will do to this city.
You know, Brussels has been feeling the impact of terrorism for a while now. It all started with the Brussels terror attacks that happened actually now more than a year ago. So this is not the first time, but this is certainly the biggest terror attack on Brussels soil. And I think the fact that it happened somewhere where anyone could be, at a train station, at the airport, everyday Belgians go there all the time. I think this is going to change the way people live their lives. It's going to create some fear, I would say.
All right, Zoya, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much indeed. And still to come on the ITV Evening News this evening, the latest on the investigation. 3 prime suspects, and police issue a most wanted alert for the man dressed in white. And across the UK tonight, security has been stepped up at airports and railway stations. Join us again after this break. Welcome back to Belgium. The news is dominated by the Brussels bomb attacks in which at least 34 people were killed. Tonight, a security camera photograph was released, allegedly showing 3 suspected attackers pushing luggage trolleys into Brussels airport just before the blasts. Today's attacks took place just days after the arrest of Salah Abdeslam, a key suspect in last November's Paris attacks. Brussels had become a city known as a hotbed of jihadist activity. Security editor Rohit Khatri reports on the investigation to track down who was behind the bombings.
The men thought to be behind the airport attack. The suspect on the right is on the run. The others blew themselves up. 2 are wearing a single glove, possibly to conceal detonators. They look like tourists, but they're suspected terrorists. Minutes later, the carnage began. And then the investigation. This video appears to show a raid in a Brussels suburb. Armed police inch towards a home. And in central Brussels, 2 men were arrested close to a railway station.
A judge has been appointed to go to Zaventem to quickly do everything to retrace the eventual perpetrators and to ensure there are not other perpetrators on the run.
After Paris, homes were raided in Brussels. For 130 days, it too has been gripped by the impact of terrorism. But 4 months of investigation couldn't prevent this. Deadly attacks, many locations, predictable targets. By the end of last year, a series of raids in and around Brussels resulted in 5 arrests. Then, days ago, Paris attacker Salah Abdeslam was arrested in Brussels. And only yesterday, a new suspect was named, Najim Lakwawi. Now another attack in Europe claimed by IS.
There have been concerns across Europe that ISIS were planning another attack after Paris. This sadly has come to fruition. But the British counter-terrorism machine, if you like, has been disrupting a number of plots over the last 6-12 months. And sadly, today Brussels has seen what happens if you don't disrupt these plots. If they get through, you see a high loss of life.
One of countless questions tonight. Were today's attackers linked to Paris, or perhaps more worryingly, an unknown cell?
And Rohit's with me now. Rohit, was this an intelligence failure or an illustration of just how difficult it is to prevent these attacks?
Well, possibly both, Mark. I think the complexity of this plot is underlined with news from one of the police raids this evening that detectives have found not only an IS flag, but a nail bomb and what they describe as chemical products too. But make no mistake, there are certainly signs of failure here inside the city that's become the jihadist capital of Europe. It took them 4 months to find Abdeslam. They were celebrating a so-called victory on Friday. One Belgian official told me then that they turned the city upside down in their search. And yet, a few days later, we have this. It's hard not to conclude that there have been failures here. It's hard not to conclude, too, that right at the heart of Europe, there are serious gaps in their intelligence gathering efforts.
Presumably a huge inquiry underway here tonight.
Yes.
All right, Rohit, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, back in the UK, David Cameron called a session of the UK's Emergency Cobra Committee as soon as the gravity of today's attacks became clear. A lot of police activity still going on here tonight, by the way. He pledged British support for Belgium and said Europe needed to stand together against the terrorists. Security was immediately tightened at Britain's main airports and transport hubs. Tonight, the Belgian flag flew over Downing Street in solidarity. Dan Rivers now on the British response to this morning's outrages.
At one of the terminals where flights to Brussels were grounded as the attacks unfolded, today a highly visible police presence designed to reassure and deter. The tightened security was also introduced at the Eurostar terminal in London, where services to Brussels remain suspended tonight as the transport lockdown there continued to cause major disruption here. All this as senior politicians gathered for an emergency Cobra meeting in Downing Street, formulating the British response to the atrocities in Brussels.
There'll be increased police presence at ports, airports, underground stations and international railway stations, as you'd expect. But these are difficult times, these are appalling terrorists, but we must stand together to do everything we can to stop them.
That might mean more police in the departure halls, but no one is searched before they enter this part of the airport. Preventing a similar attack here would require a wholesale rethink of how our airports are protected. Events in Brussels are bound to prompt a review of security at Britain's airports. In many parts of the world, there are security checks before people go into the terminal. But security experts say that measure could create a target outside.
You'll create possibly a bigger crowd there, and that's what they want. They want us to invest more money, cause more disruption, and of course they can always go away from airports to transport hubs, as we've seen them attack the metro. They can go to shopping centres. They have an infinite capacity to create violence and disruption.
Today, the Belgian tricolour was hoisted alongside the Union flag above Downing Street. Britain standing together in solidarity with Brussels against those who are waging war on the West. Dan Rivers, ITV News, Westminster.
And so tonight Brussels is a city in shock. At least 34 people are dead and around 200 others are injured. The explosions were both merciless and indiscriminate. They tore through the morning rush hour as thousands of people hurried to work, just going about their daily business. The city's main international airport and a city centre metro station reduced in an instant to a war zone. The words of Belgium's Prime Minister said it all. A day of tragedy, he called it, a black day. What's left this evening is a city whose citizens can only do their best to come to terms with the horror of what began to unfold here 12 hours ago. And what about this tonight? In another city that understands the horror of terror attacks all too well, a gesture of support. The Eiffel Tower lit up in the colours of the Belgian flag. And that is it for now. Tom Bradby will be here later with news at 10. But from all the team here in Brussels and in London, bye-bye.